How did they discover she had been murdered?
They banged on her door and received no response, and that's when they called the Orlando Police Department.
They looked around initially, and upon closer inspection of the bedroom, they noticed a large comforter rolled up and there was some hair sticking out at one end.
She had also been beaten, and it was clear that she had been trying to fight for her life.
People are saying they saw him following the suspect.
He admitted that he went in after Sasha and actually watched her fumble with her key fob.
But that's not what he told police, is it?
They had actually followed her back to her apartment. This is when his story changed.
Hi, I'm Nancy O'Dell. Today's Crime Exposé takes us to Orlando, Florida. A young woman was brutally raped and murdered in her own apartment. She lived in a high-end complex with cameras and security, but that did not protect her from a killer. In the end, the perpetrator believed he was smarter than the police, and that was his downfall. An October morning in Orlando, Florida, 27-year-old Sasha Samsudean had stood up her breakfast date. And when morning turned to afternoon with no word from Sasha's friend Anthony grew concerned.
They were supposed to meet for breakfast in the morning, and he hadn't heard from her, and he gave her a little bit of a break because he felt maybe she had overdrank that night before and she was sleeping in a little. But as the day passed, he got worried and he started calling friends and looking for her. She had been out the night before with some friends, and they were out drinking, and she lived very close. She decided she'd rather walk home because it was very close, and that was the last time that the friends had seen her.
Anthony said that Sasha wasn't answering her phone and believed that she may have been hungover.
She had scheduled to go to a baby shower, and she hadn't shown up, and that was very uncharacteristic of her.
Anthony and two of her friends went to her apartment to go check on her. They arrived in the apartment complex and noticed Sasha's car in the parking lot. They also saw the baby shower gift still in the car. They banged on her door and received no response, and that's when they called the Orlando Police Department.
Hi, I need to fill out a missing persons report. We went to her apartment to go check. She's there, and she's not here.
And what is her first name?
Her first name is Sasha.
That one was the last time you saw her?
Describe the scene when police reached Sasha's apartment.
When the officers came, security let them in, and they looked around. Initially, didn't notice anything, but upon closer inspection of the bedroom, they noticed a large comforter rolled up and there was some hair sticking out at one end. Obviously, if someone's perished and rolled up in a concealed inside of a comforter, you have a crime scene, you have a murder. So they immediately backed off and contacted the detectives. The entire apartment's a crime scene. You're going to keep it secure until a medical examiner can process the remains, and then go about processing the apartment.
Detectives searched the apartment for any evidence that might have DNA on it. In the bathroom, they noticed the toilet seat was up, and Sasha lived alone. They thought this was odd. A closer examination revealed latent prints were able to be recovered from underneath the lid of the toilet seat. There was also a partial shoe print on the floor. Detectives smelled a strong odor of bleach, which indicates that someone had tried to clean up the crime scene.
Nowadays, the draw in downtown areas is to be in a secure facility. You'll have a nice secure area that's patrolled by a security guard, and usually a key or some kind of electrical proxy key that allows you in and out. When there are no signs of forced entry, immediately you go to think of someone they knew or someone that had earned their way inside through a position of trust. Generally, you don't find people inside an apartment that don't belong there unless they've broken in or they've been let in.
Police were hopeful that the building's security cameras could ID a suspect in the murder of Sasha Samsudean. In the meantime, they went back to her friend Anthony, who had made the welfare check call to police.
Detectives then questioned Anthony again, since he was the first person who made the call to police. Anthony was cooperative and continued to recount the night before. He also provided DNA. Well, detectives met with the security guard who was working that night. He remembered Sasha coming home because she was extremely intoxicated. He observed Sasha with 2 other women, and they could not get inside the building because she did not have her key.
They determined that the victim had actually obtained a ride home in an Uber with 2 girls.
The media was asked to help in identifying these 2 women that accompanied Sasha that night.
Police are asking anyone who was in the area of North Orange Avenue and Mark Street early Saturday morning to please call them.
These 2 women came forward and were willing to assist in the investigation.
They said that they'd seen her walking and she was intoxicated, so they convinced her to get in the car. And they brought her actually right to the front of her complex, and that's where they saw her talk to the security guard.
The security guard asked to see Sasha's identification, and Sasha did not have it on her. And her friends became upset and irate at the security guard for asking that question.
So how did Sasha finally gain entry into the apartment complex without a key?
The security guard on duty recalled the victim had come home that night and didn't have the fob to get in, and she was with 2 females. And they got in a little bit of an argument because the security guard wasn't letting her in, but an individual who knew the victim was actually outside, saw her and said, I know her, and he'd let her in. So she went in and the girls went home.
The security guard stated that another male resident let her in, but did not see where she went after she had got through the front door. From the key fob records, police detectives were able to determine who the male was.
They were able to locate the individual who let her in at that time, and they were able to track him down in this unit. And he was very cooperative. He confirmed what the witnesses said.
Detectives met with Sasha's friends and family to retrace her movements after leaving the bar. They looked for anything that might be a clue or a person of interest in her death. When Sasha's autopsy was completed, it confirmed everyone's worst fears.
The cause of death was strangulation. The medical examiner noted that her shirt and bra had been ripped and she had no underwear on. There were obvious signs of bruising on her neck and her body. She had also been beaten and sexually battered by an individual. Her hands were covered in defensive wounds, and it was clear that she had been trying to fight for her life.
She was beaten and raped. They also located some DNA on her chest and torso.
The DNA evidence was critical to finding out who committed Sasha's murder, and it would reveal a surprising suspect nearer to the victim than police imagined.
He had actually followed her back to her apartment. This is when his story changed.
Sasha Samsudean had been raped and murdered in her luxury high-rise apartment. People in Orlando were shocked by the brazen attack. Detectives went through the list of possible suspects, trying to eliminate those who had nothing to do with her death. Sasha's friend Anthony and the resident who helped her get into the building had both submitted DNA to police.
Anthony was cooperative and continued to recount the night before. He also provided DNA, and he was not a match.
They were able to locate the individual who let her in at that time. He was very cooperative, also provided his DNA, and was ultimately cleared.
Meanwhile, police talked further to anyone who had seen or talked to Sasha the night before her body was discovered. They began with the women who had picked Sasha up and drove her home.
Did you guys know her? Or?
No, but as we were leaving, saw her walking by herself and was very concerned just because she seemed extremely intoxicated. So I walked up and kind of took her arm and said, like, do you know where you're going? And you could tell she didn't really know what was going on. And so at that moment, got her to get into an Uber with us.
They brought her actually right to the front of her complex, and that's where they saw her talk to the security guard and got a little angry with the guy because he was initially letting her in, but ultimately she got in, and they actually saw the security guard follow the victim inside the complex.
Something wasn't adding up. Police began retracing the steps in their investigation, looking for anything they might have overlooked. What did police do as they reset their investigation?
Ultimately, when they did canvass the area, which you would do, you'd go knocking on doors immediately. And someone said that they had seen the security guard, and actually follow her back into the building.
Detectives then went to speak to the security guard, Steven Duxbury. The security guard admitted that he went in after Sasha and actually watched her fumble with her key fob to try to get into her apartment door.
But that wasn't what the guard told police the morning that Sasha was discovered dead, and they wondered how he could have neglected to include this important detail when they first spoke. So on the second interview with guard Steven Duxbury, what did he tell police that time?
Well, his first story was that he wasn't allowing her in because she didn't have a proxy key, which was proper. We would hope a security guard would do that, would at least question and maybe even call the police. In this case, he initially did the right thing by not letting her in, but the following day the story changes that he had actually followed her back to her apartment.
Police detectives became increasingly suspicious as to why the security guard would leave out this detail in his initial account.
So how did Mr. Duxbury frame his story in the second interview?
This time, he admits that he followed her to her apartment, and he watched her from a distance go inside her apartment and then left. This would be a red flag, when a story to that degree changes, that you forget a major piece of information like following the victim back to her apartment and watching her go in safely when there's a murder in question. That is a big, big question mark.
Finally, police were able to locate the security camera footage from the apartment complex. There were hours of footage filmed from multiple locations to view. Detectives searched through footage for any sign of Sasha or suspicious person in the building.
Sometimes the security systems don't see everything or are positioned poorly, but in this case, when you get a chance to look at the footage the night it happened, you're going to get to see, hopefully a view of her hallway with her going in and out of her apartment, of her walking around or anybody following her or anyone suspicious in the area.
After hours of scanning through the footage, police saw the victim entering the complex. As Sasha headed towards her apartment, someone appeared again and again in the background. Steven Duxbury, the security guard.
Detectives were able to observe Duxbury actually following Sasha for 40 minutes throughout the apartment building.
Apparently she was intoxicated, so she was having a degree of difficulty finding her unit, but ultimately she does find her unit, but they lose sight of him on the camera.
Suddenly, Steven Duxbury was more than a person of interest. Police knew he hadn't been truthful in his interview when they first spoke.
Nothing is seen other than him ultimately later leaving the complex. I don't think he was seen leaving the unit, but he was actually seen hours later leaving with a white trash bag, which is very concerning.
Police now suspected Steven Duxbury in the murder of Sasha Samsudean. They believed he was involved in some way, but they needed hard evidence, and it would come from the perpetrator himself.
In this case, the evidence strongly pinpointed probable cause.
Homicide detectives had identified a suspect in the murder of Sasha Samsudean, the security guard who let Sasha into the apartment complex the night she was killed, Steven Duxbury. All their efforts were focused on Duxbury to implicate himself in some way. They asked him to take a polygraph exam.
Generally, with a polygrapher, they can determine when someone's stressed out, when they're indicating they're being deceptive. They develop these telltale signs.
So here are the questions I'm going to ask you about that night. Okay. Did you enter Sasha's apartment that night? No.
During Duxbury's polygraph, the examiner noticed classic signs of stress and deception from a person who has something to hide.
Was she stabbed? No. Was she choked? No.
His breathing was obviously erratic. That every time he was asked a question, he exhibited these signs of anxiety and breathing faster and his pulse elevating. So that's what we would call failing miserably.
The cards were beginning to stack up against Steven Duxbury and the murder of Sasha Samsudean. All the evidence pointed to the security guard. So what were police thinking at this point about Mr. Duxbury?
At this point, when he changes his story, and people are saying they saw him following the suspect, we have enough circumstantial evidence to get DNA and fingerprints, obviously, if he's has indicated some deception and his story changes. Ultimately, his fingerprints and his DNA come back to the evidence found in the bathroom, the fingerprints under the toilet seat. There's also a footprint from one of his shoes that was found on the floor, and additionally, his DNA that was taken from the victim's torso.
Police detectives submitted the latent prints to be matched against the fingerprints, and it was a match. Also, the DNA was a match, and the shoe print in the bathroom was also a match. As a detective, you always wanted to have a resolution for the family, and in this case, the evidence strongly pinpointed and developed probable cause that Duxbury was the murderer.
So how do you explain the turn of events, the revelation that Mr. Duxbury was the killer?
This places him in a very unique position of having to really be unable to explain his way out of it. He's charged with first-degree murder.
Steven Duxbury was arrested for capital murder and the burglary of Sasha's apartment.
When you enter any type of structure or conveyance with the intent to commit a crime inside, this is considered a burglary. By entering this unit, obviously by force or by deception, he committed a burglary because he committed an offense therein.
It was a cruel irony that someone who should have protected Sasha Samsudean would turn out to be her killer.
What stands out in this case is it's unconscionable to think that a security guard who's responsible for saving lives or protecting property is actually the very one who committed a murder in the complex that he was hired to protect.
This is not uncommon. People find their ways into all kinds of jobs, including law enforcement, and commit heinous crimes against society. They get put into a position of trust, and unfortunately this happens.
Police had found the killer's DNA on the victim, his fingerprints in her apartment, and security camera footage showed Steven Duxbury following Sasha to her apartment door. It was evidence that was hard to refute.
Well, ultimately, his fingerprints and his DNA come back to the evidence found.
Steven Duxbury was found guilty of first-degree murder, attempted sexual battery, and burglary in the death and rape of Sasha Samsudean. He received 2 life sentences without parole and an additional 15 years for the burglary. Meanwhile, Sasha's parents sued the apartment building and the security company for their role in the death of their daughter. The murder of Sasha Samsudean demonstrates how critical it is for strict FBI guidelines on security personnel and the importance of security cameras in public buildings and residences. And now, it's time for today's Safety Spotlight. While it's impossible to predict when a crime may occur, taking proactive steps can significantly reduce your risk and enhance personal safety. Avoid walking alone at night, especially in remote or high-risk areas like alleys and parking garages. Let a friend or family member know your whereabouts and when you expect to leave or arrive. Consider carrying a safety device like a personal alarm or pepper spray to potentially fend off an attacker. Use personal safety apps like You Are Safe or Noonlight to alert authorities. And if you see something suspicious, report it to law enforcement. I'm Nancy O'Dell. For everyone here at Crime Exposé, please join us next time and stay safe.